We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS is bringing you the latest news from a revolving world, alongside The Globalist. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 15th of April 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up, Taiwan braces itself for tariffs. But with the will they, won't they approach from the White House, what plans can the world's largest producer of advanced semiconductors realistically make? Also ahead in the next 60 minutes.
You know, it's easy to talk about European unity and a coherent European response, but Europe has never actually had to act for its own survival.
Robert Kaplan, the former member of the Pentagon's Defence Policy Board, assesses Europe's efforts to meet the challenge of current global instability. Plus, Monocle's luxury markets editor, Brenda Toohey's joining me in the studio with details of a once-in-a-lifetime display of jewels. Won't you, Brenda?
I'll tell you all about a new exhibition showcasing more than a century of Cartier's show-stopping creations, including royal tiaras and private collection items you won't see anywhere else.
Look forward to it. Plus the papers and the aviation news too. That's all ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. The president of El Salvador says he won't return to the US, a man mistakenly deported and jailed there as a gang member. Hungary's parliament has approved constitutional changes which target LGBT people. And Pope Francis has placed the Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí on the path to sainthood. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, who knows how long we have to wait until the next wave of tariffs is announced by the White House. On Sunday, the US President Donald Trump said new duties would be revealed on semiconductors imported to the US at some point this week, but that there would be some flexibility. So what does this mean for places like Taiwan, which produces about 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors? Well, to tell us more, I'm joined now by William Yang, journalist based in Taipei, which is where he joins me from now. A very good afternoon to you, William.
Thank you for having me again.
Could you just briefly recap just how important Taiwan is to the world of semiconductors and, as a result, the manufacture of pretty much everything that we use daily?
Right. So Taiwan manufactures about 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductor chips. And a lot of the suppliers for the world's most advanced and most cutting edge chips are manufactured by this particular Taiwanese company, TSMC. And in recent years, we know that since Donald Trump came back into power, he's been trying to pressure this company to reshore up their production in the United States. They signed a $100 billion deal for a multi-year expansion of their manufacturing capacity in Arizona. And so from here, we could see that the U.S. government is already using pressure to basically ensure that they can make sure that the U.S. is not going to rely so heavily on Taiwan for the supply of all these chips because of, I think, a multitude of different reasons. One of that is the geopolitical concerns, but also at the same time is the competition with China. And with Taiwan being so close to China by proximity, the U.S. is now looking at reducing the risks of any disruption in case that a potential military conflict breaks out across the Taiwan Strait.
Because this is a really difficult moment for Taiwan, as you described it. It needs the protection of the United States, doesn't it?
Right. Taiwan basically relies entirely on the US, both for its own defense capabilities and the acquisition of all these weapon systems that it needs to deter China from actually launching a military attack. It's been the case for the last few decades, and with the pressure that China is imposing on Taiwan rising every year since 2022, Taiwan's position in dealing with a more unpredictable US government under Donald Trump is just becoming more precarious. And now I think the US government definitely fully understands that. So they are trying to use this so-called security guarantee as a way to leverage and shore up and ensure that it is protecting its own economic interests.
It's an interesting balance it has to strike because Taiwan's dominance of a component which literally powers the world has obviously raised questions about the fragility of global supply chains. And we've seen, I think it was in July last year, that Donald Trump started to repeat a very, very well-trodden message about how the Taiwanese have stolen the semiconductor world. But given Taiwan's supremacy in here, why does it feel as if it doesn't have as much leverage as it should do?
So I think the number one reason, obviously, is because the current ruling party here in Taiwan really aligns its foreign policy solely with the United States since it came back into power in 2016. So it's been almost a decade now. And with the pressure coming from Beijing growing exponentially since 2022, it really is now feeling like it has to appease to whatever demands that are coming from the Trump administration, especially because it really looks like at any point Donald Trump could decide to walk back and strike a deal with China. And if Taiwan is not involved in that process, then it basically will be very vulnerable to any decision that's been made between the world's two largest economies without its own involvement. So right now, I think Taiwan is trying to prove to the Trump administration that it is committed to be a very reliable partner to provide whatever demands that the U.S. government is making to Taiwan.
There are negotiations taking place. So what kind of reliable partner could Taiwan be? I mean, what does it have to give up in order to keep the United States' favor?
So as we already saw in January, TSMC announced this new expansion that already is sort of like helping to reduce the level of skepticism that Donald Trump is expressing about Taiwan stealing the chips. He changed his rhetoric from Taiwan stealing the chips from they stole the chips, but actually I admire them for their ability to produce these high-end chips at such a level and magnitude. So I think we are seeing possibly the more Taiwan's negotiation is going to be surrounding the promise of pushing and ensuring that more Taiwanese chip companies are going to enlarge their investment in the U.S. and at the same time trying to secure somewhat of a guarantee from the Trump administration.
Let's continue now with looking at what could happen, though, if there were a shortage of chips. I think we got a slight taste of it. Well, we got a severe taste of it during the pandemic when the chip shortage, because of the factory closures, meant that manufacturing across the world ended up experiencing severe delays. The price of cars went up. The price of lots of products went up. What damage could be done if Taipei was suddenly prevented from exporting its semiconductors at a proper price?
That's basically going to create an across-the-board kind of shock through many different industries. Like you mentioned, so many different things are now powered by these chips that are mostly manufactured and produced here in Taiwan. So from the car industry to the home appliance industry to our cell phones and everything that we look at the electronics, basically any consumer electronics industry will be severely impacted. So I think that's why after the shock experience during the pandemic and the disruption, the governments here in Taiwan, but also around the world, have all adopted this idea of diversifying the manufacturing. So we saw TSMC setting up its initial factories and foundries in Arizona, but also there are now plans to set up factories in Germany and also Japan. The idea is that to diversify these manufacturing capacities across these countries that are considered as reliable democratic partners, rather than allowing the disruption to create an opening for countries like China, which the US and all its democratic allies have high level of skepticism about when China is trying to take advantage of the supply chain disruption and how that's going to create difficulty for the rest of the world.
What about threats from other parts of the world? I mean, we've seen in the last 12 hours headlines coming out of both the United States and also South Korea. NVIDIA, which is the US company, it says it's going to build artificial intelligence servers in the US. It currently builds most of its processors in Taiwan. And also we've seen in the last few years, South Korea is going to increase an enormous support package for the semiconductor industry. Is there a sense that the rest of the world will try and rebalance this?
Yes, I think because of the realization that the AI age is basically going to become not only just a pure technological and economic competition across the world, but it's also going to become governments coming in to try to shore up and secure their own stockpiles and also capacity and access to these very high-end but also difficult to access chips. So that's why I think South Korea is now planning to acquire at least 10,000 of these very high-end AI chips from NVIDIA by the end of the year. And this is, I think, just a reflection of this global competition, not only just among democratic countries and autocratic countries, but also just among democratic countries themselves, because a lot of these countries that are trying to stockpile up their own stockpile of the chips are, in fact, also countries that rely heavily on high-tech production as part of their economic driver.
William Yang, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Taipei. Now, as Trump's escalating trade war roiled European markets and shook the transatlantic relationship, last week leaders descended on the Delphi Economic Forum to try to come up with a response. Reporting from the forum was Monocle's Andrew Muller, and he sat down with Robert Kaplan, a former member of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board and the US Navy's executive panel, to talk about just how big a departure from the status quo these moves are. Andrew began by asking Robert just what on earth the United States thinks it's doing.
Well, I think we've never had a time in decades where so much depends on one person. We're really in the realm of Shakespeare. So it's not even explaining the United States, it's explaining this character right out of a Shakespearean tragedy, who every move he makes affects the world like nothing else. It's like Trump is truly a world historical figure. And I don't mean that in a good way. I just mean it in an impactful way, so to speak. So how do you explain him? Well, I'd put it this way. Globalization has split America down the middle. It's created this wine-sipping, European vacation-oriented, cosmopolitan, upper-middle class that lives on the two coasts and in the college towns and big cities in between. And another half of America who have been left behind, who are stuck in the old nation state. And so the center is gone. Rather than a center left and a center right, we now have a very radical progressive left and a populist Trumpian right, so that elections have enormous meanings. And so now we have a situation where one half of the country is tyrannizing the other half and tyrannizing the world as well.
I mean, Shakespeare's plays famously always end really happily for everybody involved. Is it clear to you what Trump sees as an end point of whatever it is he's doing?
Yeah. Well, not Shakespeare's tragedies, his comedies do, but some of his histories and tragedies, end quite bleakly. I mean, look at King Lear. And you can imagine Trump on the heath, unknowing. And it is all this, but I don't think he has a coherent geopolitical plan. I think he sees everything as a negotiation which he has the upper hand about domination. Trump is about domination. He's beyond being a bully. A bully is just you don't grasp at any level the real enormity of it. He's beyond being a bully. He wants total control, total domination. And you can see it with these tariff moves. I've spoken to people in the financial community, and I said, what happens next with the stock market? These are all geniuses. And they said, we don't know.
I mean, does it strike you, though, that he is fundamentally, at any level, a rational actor? Or is he, and this is a very Shakespearean quality as well, just proceeding entirely on some atavistic instinct that maybe he doesn't understand himself?
That's a good way of putting it, Andrew. An atavistic instinct that he doesn't entirely understand himself. I'm not sure if he's a rational actor. We will find out, though, in the coming weeks, because the pressure upon him from not just his enemies, but from the people he respects, the billionaires. I mean, Marco Rubio's a senator. He's just like a hired hand. Trump has no respect for him, But the billionaires around Trump respects. And the whole financial community, the people Trump is always bragging about how he lifts the stock market. Well, that's not happening now. So we will find out if he is a rational actor, because if he is, he will find some way to climb down on this.
What's your sense so far of how coherently and competently Europe has responded to the last few weeks in particular? Obviously, it is difficult when everybody, as you've suggested, is as baffled as everybody else. But if there's no coherent plan in the United States, does it strike you that there is yet one developing in Europe?
Well, it's problematic with Europe for the same reason European defense is problematic, and it's because there is no real European unity. The states are simply too diverse to come up with a coherent plan. So just as Trump's diminution of NATO has thrown Europe on its back feet, so has this. It's easy to talk about European unity and a coherent European response, but Europe has never actually had to act for its own survival, and in such a raw geopolitical and financial way as in recent weeks.
But do you get the sense that Europe does at least grasp the reality of its situation? Because it has been pointed out, as you're well aware, especially by politicians closer to Russia, that this is a real threat, that things have changed. And they've been screaming this not only since 2014, but since 2008, when Russia invaded Georgia. But do you think the rest of Europe does now actually understand that, and also understands that it does not have its ally of last resort, the United States, in its corner anymore?
Yes, I think Europe understands that, but being able to respond effectively is another story entirely. Remember, in 2011, Robert Gates, the Secretary of Defense for Barack Obama, no less, warned Europe that if it did not dramatically raise its defense budgets, the U.S. would eventually desert it. And this was 2011, and Europe did nothing. And now it's in this situation.
And that was Robert Kaplan talking to Andrew Muller at the Delphi Economic Forum. For more coverage of the event, tune into the Foreign Desk. Still to come on today's Globalist.
The new service looks to pamper guests as they journey on overnight excursions to destinations across the peninsula, from Portofino to the vineyards of Montalcino.
We head to Italy to hear about the latest addition to the world of luxury sleeper trains. Stay with us on Monocle Radio.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS House View, you get the big picture in bite-sized articles, delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts, all focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. UBS, banking is our craft.
It's 8:19 a.m. in Paris, which is where we head now for today's newspapers. I'm joined now by our bureau chief in Paris, Simon Bouvier. Good morning, Simon. How's the French capital looking today, and how are you?
It's looking mighty grey, but I will not let that affect my mood, Emma.
Okay, wonderful, which I'm hoping is absolutely chipper, and you're full of enthusiasm and energy to bring us the papers. What's caught your eye?
Indeed. You have to stay positive in the face of some of these headlines. The first one is about a story that we've covered together, Emma, the diplomatic spat between Algeria and France, which in the middle of all of this international news about trade wars and stuff has flown under the radar, but is a pretty big deal. The latest development in these escalating tensions between Algeria and France is that Algiers has expelled 12 consular staff from Algiers. It's an unheard of move since the 1960s. The context for this is that there is a competition going on in France for the leadership of the traditional right-wing party, Les Républicains, and there have been kind of growing calls to stand up to Algeria, to force them to take back its citizens who are living in France but who have been sentenced by a court to be returned to their homeland. The only issue is Algeria is not accepting these citizens of its country. They say, you can keep them, thank you very much, those people are trouble. And so that has caused tensions, and obviously because right-wing parties are trying to enter in competition with the Rassemblement National of Marine Le Pen, who have a pretty hard line on these questions, there have been calls for the government to do something, to not be passive. So French diplomats are in a bit of a tricky spot here.
And it's as you say, it's a story that's been missing off the radar, given the fact that the headlines are dominated by other stories. But this is an enormous schism between Algeria and France, isn't it? This cannot be underestimated.
That's right, and it's on the front page of Le Figaro today, and I think it's easy if you don't live in France to underestimate the strength of the ties between the two cultures as well. So many French citizens of Algerian descent, so many Algerian citizens living in France. So many writers, cultural figures, I think we mentioned them last time we talked about the story as well, who are caught in the middle because they feel like they're Algeria and France are both part of their identity and they're being made to choose sides. Some of these dual national writers, like the writer Boilem Sansal, have been jailed in Algeria over their criticism of the regime there. So it really is a wrenching diplomatic issue. I think President Macron and his foreign minister are trying to stay calm and trying to create a kind of atmosphere where de-escalation can happen, but the domestic politics on both sides of this equation are not auspicious for ratcheting down tensions.
Indeed, but who is there any voice out there which is able to ratchet down these tensions?
I think so. I think that, again, the kind of professionals in the French diplomatic service and the president himself, I have to say, have been very conciliatory and have been saying, throwing out all of the treaties that we have with Algeria that govern our interactions and immigration between the two countries is not really a smart move, even if it's something that some of these kind of more political standpoints are calling for, to kind of throw everything out and start over. So I think, the other problem is that the Algerian regime are a bit mercurial. One day it seems like, the foreign minister is visiting Algeria. President Macron's spoken to the Algerian president over the phone. Everything seems to be getting smoothed over. Maybe one of these jailed writers is about to be released. And then, today we learn 12 expulsions, unprecedented move since the 1960s, as I was saying earlier. So I think the stability here is more coming from the French side.
Let's turn to a profile in Les Echos with the Finance Minister Eric Lombard, a man described as a banker tasked with saving the French economy. It begins with an excellent image, doesn't it, of Monsieur Lombard and having a small figure of Yoda from Star Wars on his desk and using the quote, "The future is always in motion."
Yes, and may the force be with him indeed, because Eric Lombard, whose kind of moniker is the banquier de gauche, the leftist banker. He's one of the only members of François Bayrou's current government who has kind of true center-left bona fides. And he has one of the most important missions in this government, which is to bring runaway public spending under control in a context where there have been a number of quote-unquote technical errors, or that's a kind of euphemism for incompetence on the side of the French kind of bureaucrats in charge of public finances that have led the deficit to really balloon in the last couple of years. And now he has to try to find 40 billion euros, but everybody is adamant that there should be no increases in taxes, either for individuals or for businesses. So how he's going to perform this Jedi mind trick is going to be through budget cuts. And of course, no increases in taxes, no increases in corporate taxes either. But also, we want all of the quality of the services to remain the same. So, cutting $40 billion euros, in public services or in public spending without affecting the quality of the services, that's going to be a tough task ahead. And today, the Prime Minister, François Bayrou, is convening all of the ministers, corporate representatives of unions, to discuss the rules of this kind of budget talks that are going to open today.
Indeed. I mean, he's got this impossible job, and he trimmed the government's growth forecast last week, didn't he? That France is expected to grow only by 0.7% instead of 0.9%. How much faith is there in Lombard, and what is his reasoning? How do people actually trust this man to navigate the French economy to safety?
I think, as far as him personally, I don't think there is much for people to have gripes about when it comes to his character and his qualifications. I just think that it's a head scratcher, and most people who are reading the papers are thinking, how the heck is he going to pull this off? Because it is a puzzle that, even if you only consider the French domestic side of things, this runaway public spending, plus these political requirements of not doing too much to increase taxes and not doing too much to cut the quality of services, there's also the international context of this escalating trade war, this uncertainty over, are we going to be the subject of these tariffs from the Trump administration or not? Are they going to impose 200% tariffs on French wine tomorrow because they feel like it? I think that is out of his hands, but one of the most important levers that he has to raise money is economic growth, and if that's being affected by things that are outside of his control, he can be as competent as he likes. It's not going to be possible for him to reach these targets. So I think he should be congratulated for keeping his cool, but now today the real test of seeing who is willing to compromise on what will begin.
Let's move on to another article, this time in Le Monde, which explores, again, this perennial problem that the French and indeed lots of countries have about the restitution of cultural property and what France does in relation to its former colonies, who are asking basically for their heritage back.
That's right, and I think there was a seminal moment in 2017 when the just inaugurated President Macron traveled to Ouagadougou and held a speech saying, essentially, I'm the first French president that was born after the era of colonization, so things are going to be different. I'm not going to tell you what our relationship is going to look like. And restitutions of cultural goods was a part of this kind of reset that he was trying to move forward with. And they did very serious work on it at the beginning. He ordered all of these museums to make studies and determine which artworks had been stolen from where and under what conditions they could be returned. But that momentum, with a lot of the kind of social crises in France, a lot of the international situation degrading with the war in Ukraine and other things, I think has moved this issue onto the back burner in a very major way. And so this article is fascinating because it shows that there are these collectives of African artists and researchers who are kind of taking over the torch, right? The baton from this momentum that was created originally by this kind of government drive, really, in France to make a factual study of what was pillaged from where and how they could be returned. So yes, right now, the problem is there is no law in France that generally governs how these different cultural goods should be returned to their countries of origin when it has been determined that they have been stolen. So they have to do it on a case-by-case basis. There's a quote from a senator in that article that says, it's absurd, we have to make a law that is specific to a particular artwork. The example that they use is a drum that was stolen from Côte d'Ivoire and that they want to return, and that they have to pass a law that is specific to that drum to say it is okay for us to return it to them. So that level of granularity, considering the scale of what we're talking about here, is not going to lead to much movement.
No, it'll take a very, very long time. Simon Bouvier, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Paris. The time here in London is 7:30 a.m. You're listening to Monocle Radio with me, Emma Nelson. This is The Globalist, and a quick summary now of what else we're keeping an eye on today. The president of El Salvador says he won't return to the US, a man mistakenly deported and jailed there as a gang member. Nayib Bukele said he didn't have the power to send back Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States. He was speaking during a meeting with President Trump in the White House. Hungary's parliament has approved constitutional changes which target LGBT people. The amendment cracks down on public gatherings, which is seen as promoting homosexuality. And Pope Francis has placed a Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí on the path to sainthood. He's been declared venerable for what the Vatican said were his heroic values. Gaudí's most famous work is the unfinished Sagrada Familia Basilica in Barcelona. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now for a quick look behind some of the other headlines we're following here on Monocle Radio. Here's Rory Jones on how Turkey's President Erdogan is hoping to position himself on the world stage.
The fourth edition of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, Turkey's annual three-day gathering of diplomats and policymakers, concluded this weekend on the Turkish Med. The gathering was convened by Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who took a bullish stance on his nation's status as a global mediator, even if his real concern lies well within his own borders. Monocle's Istanbul correspondent Hannah Lucinda Smith argued that Erdogan is playing to a domestic audience and is using foreign policy as a campaigning tool. Among his impassioned speeches, the conflict in Gaza loomed large and he accused Israel of genocide. The theme for the year's forum was reclaiming democracy. However, on the same weekend, Istanbul's mayor and Erdogan's main political rival, Ekrem İmamoğlu, appeared in court, which rejected his appeal for release on widely disputed charges of terrorism and corruption. The irony will no doubt not be lost on the mayor's supporters.
That was Monocle's Rory Jones. For more from our editors and correspondents, sign up for a free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. Now, the last time the city of Osaka held a World Expo was in 1970. Japan was eager to display just how far it had come on its journey to becoming a post-war economic and technological poster child. Well, this year, Osaka is the host again, and it's chosen Designing a Future Society for Our Lives as its theme. It opened this weekend, and our team went and experienced it before the crowds. Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi headed to the Baltic Pavilion, located inside the saving zone of the Expo, and heard from the main artist of the pavilion, Arturs Anhalts, about its concept.
This is the Baltic States Pavilion, so it's Latvia and Lithuania. And of course, the big theme is saving lives. And this is what we want to show in this pavilion. And our proposal is to coexist among three things, which is human, nature, and technology. And this is what you're going to find in our pavilion, how we can interact between these three elements and how we can actually save lives.
Thank you. What is the centerpiece of Baltic Pavilion?
Yeah, what we have here is huge green screen, which is a green panel that is not digital. It's fully analog, and it's a touch screen, basically, where you can come, write your name, leave your mark, draw a smiley face, do whatever you want. But the trick is that it's not digital. It takes the moisture from the air and it condensates. So this is the green wall that kind of condensates, and it doesn't use any technology per se. And the idea is that we humans, nature, and technology have to interact.
Could you tell us about the other exhibits?
We have a central cube with with around 300 plants from the Baltic region, and these plants are showed in display cases in glass, and they're very nuanced, very detailed. You can see the smallest details of the plants, and what's important, why the plants are there, because they grow in the Baltics. They also help saving lives, and we have information about each plant. On the purpose of it, what's the use, where it's used to create maybe medicine or teas, or maybe some new technologies used from making this plant. And this is again using nature and technology to help humans to save lives.
I think simplicity is one of the key characteristics of this pavilion's design. What is your intention behind this simple design?
I think the simplicity is that we kind of focus on the important elements to it, which is the installation. And the simplicity is also in that we want to create some sort of detox from the digital world. We understand that there is digital world, we are living in it, but we also wanted to create a detox, a space where you can rest. So that's why it's very clean, very minimalistic. We have a sound specific, we have a scent specific that kind of makes you a little bit relaxed. And I think it's very important also in Expo to come, sit, and you can just relax for a bit and enjoy the pavilion.
What inspired the design of this pavilion?
The main inspiration for our pavilion is Baltic forests, because huge part of Baltics is covered in forests, and we're very close to nature. And of course to modern world, the digital world, and this is the interlink between those two worlds. So we have a very minimalistic design, very white, very clean, and we have the green wall, which talks about forests, shows the forest. This is what we wanted to show in our pavilion.
Could you tell us about the commonalities in design between Japan and the Baltic countries? What do you think about it, and how you've made these cultures coexist within this pavilion space?
Yeah, we focus on the important elements, and this is nature. And I think the Baltic states and Japan love nature. It's very close to them, and that's why we have many elements from the nature, and they're very detailed. And details are highly important in our pavilion, and this is kind of the cultural bridge that if you stay longer in this pavilion, you'll find another element. And this is also, it's not about shouting, it's about calmness, and finding those nuances slowly and by yourself.
Thank you very much, Arturs.
And thank you to Ryuma Takahashi reporting from the Baltic Pavilion at the World Expo in Osaka. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. To to Rome now to sample a bit of the good life aboard Italy's new premium overnight rail service, the aptly named La Dolce Vita Orient Express. The Italian capital is the starting point for this latest addition to the world of luxury sleeper trains. And we sent Monocle's correspondent Ivan Carvalho to Rome to find out more about the rollout of this decidedly upscale approach to rail travel.
Rome is the birthplace of La Dolce Vita, that enviable lifestyle of enjoying small daily pleasures and moving at a slower pace. Now, all that is going mobile with a new luxury train designed to explore the best of the Bel Paese. Launched this month, the La Dolce Vita Orient Express is run by Italian hospitality brand Arsenale and French hotel group Accor, owner of the famed Orient Express brand, the world's most famous passenger train. The new service looks to pamper guests as they journey on overnight excursions to destinations across the peninsula, from Portofino to the vineyards of Montalcino. The indulgence starts in Rome, where travelers check into Orient Express La Minerva, a newly renovated Grand Hotel next to the Pantheon. After a restful night, a chauffeur takes passengers to Roma Ostiense station, where a lounge, complete with showers and a spacious bar, greets them. Smartly dressed porters then whisk bags away to the carriage. From stewards to barmen and the onboard maitre d', staff are impeccably attired in outfits that turn back the clock. Orient Express CEO, Gilda Perez Alvarado, remarked before the train's inaugural trip the aim was to take inspiration from the 1960s Dolce Vita period, one of the most exciting periods of travel. On board, 31 chic cabins with ensuite bathrooms await, all done in tastefully designed 1970s-style interiors from Dimore Studio, a Milan design team. Once unpacked, guests head to the restaurant car for lunch, and a menu overseen by Michelin chef Heinz Beck. Next door is the lounge car with full-service bar, where after dinner, live music and dancing is offered. Trains take scenic routes through less traveled regions, like Abruzzo, with its picturesque Trans-Siberian rail line that cuts through mountains. Carefully planned itineraries, including a 2-night trip to Sicily, ensure guests are engaged on and off the train, explains La Dolce Vita Orient Express General Manager Marco Girotto.
What is special about the project is that we put a lot of effort planning our itineraries, designing our itineraries, matching the time you have on board with the scenery you see and the meals you have on board and the experiences off board. For example, you leave in the morning, you have a nice meal overlooking a nice scenery, you have a relaxing afternoon in your suite, you arrive in Venice in the evening, you have dinner in a private palazzo, you have a tour of the Canal Grande with a luxury boat, you come back on the train, you have a relaxing night, you have an after party at the bar car.
By utilizing a network of railways not typically traveled on by most visitors, people get a new appreciation for Italy, all the while being well looked after, on board and off. For Monocle, riding on the La Dolce Vita Orient Express, I'm Ivan Carvalho.
Thank you, Ivan. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. It's time now to talk aviation with Sally Gethin, analyst who joins me in the studio now. A very good morning to you, Sally.
Morning.
How are things?
Great, thank you.
Good. Right, tell us what's happening in the headlines with aviation.
So we're looking at Spain being a very strong growth market in Europe for airlines and air travel this summer. We're also looking at problems again at Boeing with aircraft production, and also at some changes over the Atlantic between the market share of many of the major airlines there. Not to mention the very exciting development yesterday where the first all-female space crew launched, and what the price of a space ticket could cost you today.
Yes, when we worked out perhaps whether we wanted to or not, what a gravity-free blowout looked like. Let's talk about Spain and aviation. Obviously, Spain's kind of like the bellwether for tourism and for travel, isn't it, in the world? If Spain is doing well, then pretty much everybody else should be picking up as well. So what's happening with the Spanish market?
Well, what's happening with the Spanish market is it's racing ahead leaps and bounds from all the competition, and it's the number of in terms of the number of seats that are on offer and being sold, and so we're looking at 118 million departing seats being sold from Spain over the summer period, and it's jumped in growth 39% over the last 6 years. Now that might sound predictable because, yes, it does have a lot to offer. But the other countries, Germany, France and the UK, are not doing so well at all. And the thing is, I think the key to this is the very strong competition in the Spanish airline market. You've got a number of airlines there. Obviously, you've got the legacy carriers like Iberia, but you've also got exciting airlines like Vueling, not to mention EasyJet and Ryanair operating out of there. So there's a huge number of seats on offer, and they're all being snapped up. And of course, it is a go-to place in terms of the destinations because of its wonderful position, the Balearics and the Canaries. But there is something very strong and robust going on in Spain. It's recovered the most out of the pandemic compared to the other airlines. And indeed, other countries.
And indeed, it has a very strong domestic market as well, which is something that we don't often think about.
Yes, and I think that's very interesting that so that there's a propensity to travel much more within Spain, and of course this drives the airfares down as well. So it's it not only has those fantastic connections to the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, but also domestically. And I think that is buoyed up by the island economies as well, particularly during the peak summer months.
And indeed, I mean, you mentioned the idea of EasyJet. When you do think of Spain, for better or for worse, you do sometimes think of the fact that it is dominated by low-cost capacity. With so many players in the field or in the skies, is there a sense that oversaturation could be an issue here?
Well, so far not. I mean, will the bubble burst? That's always a question, and it's how these airlines plan and manage. I mean, I've personally gone out to the Vueling headquarters in Barcelona and seen their ops room up close and personal and talked to their key managers, and they have a forensic detail to data and technology to cater for particularly the younger, budget-conscious demographic there. So young people who are tech-savvy and are willing to embrace new ways of paying for their tickets because travel is becoming much more digital and biometric now. That is the ongoing trend, which will increase over years. And airlines like Vueling are driving that forward. They are very innovative, and this gives them the edge over many other airlines.
Let's move on to the transatlantic route. British Airways and Iberia, who we were talking a moment ago, and there was also, let's talk about the others, Finnair, American Airlines, Aer Lingus. They run their transatlantic flights through a joint venture, through a joint business agreement. This has become a problem because there are issues of competition and monopoly.
Yeah, so probably what people don't realise when they book their ticket, because many people are brand loyal, fiercely so, and that's very commendable. But actually what these airlines do, they have this Atlantic joint business agreement, and they divvy up the Atlantic and their routes, so they each get the same revenue regardless of which airline you fly. So you might think, you might be on a British Airways plane, but they get the same amount as, say, an American Airlines customer would, the revenue would come from. So, these agreements have come to the attention of the Competition Markets Authority because of the near monopoly that they operate. And of course, now the CMA, the Competition Authority, is saying you have to change your practices. You have to open up to new entrants or existing airlines that operate transatlantically. And this is on particular routes, Boston, Miami, Dallas and Chicago, London, Heathrow, to each of those destinations. So these airlines we just mentioned will be offering some concessions, offering slots in some cases, freeing up the capacity for other airlines. And of course, for passengers, that's good too, because there's greater choice and a better choice of airfares as well.
Which is good news for the customer, but probably it will, BA and an AA and the rest will all start to smart about this.
Yeah, so good for the customer, but also in the long run, BA and AA will benefit because they will keep still their dominant position on the transatlantic. So it's throwing a few, I suppose, in a way, like some crumbs off the table, but it keeps the CMA happy, and it looks like their mitigation efforts will be accepted. And I think April is the date when that will likely be formalised, but they're still open to consultation at the moment.
Let's talk about Boeing. It is beleaguered Boeing, struggling in every way that it can to try and get back up to speed. Delays in its manufacturing, not helped by the huge strike at the end of last year. Where are the figures now?
So we're really concentrating now on the production rate per month, which the Federal Aviation Administrator, the regulator, put a cap on to 38 a month. And Boeing was sort of posturing that it wanted to exceed that amount because, it wants to demonstrate that it's complying with that cap. The reason the cap was imposed was safety issues, and last year there was a alarming incident where a plug door blew out on an Alaska Airlines flight, and so the FAA got involved. But actually Boeing is operating at 31 aircraft per month. So it's really not out of the woods yet. And we have a new transportation secretary in the United States, obviously with the new White House, the new Trump administration, that's Sean Duffy, and a new regulator. And they've been out to the Boeing factory, boots on the ground there. They've gone out there and they're saying, well, you know what, they're not ready to reach that limit we put on them anyway. So Boeing is still on a go slow. There were some issues with a wing assembly that has also slowed them down. So, yeah, still some problems there.
30 seconds to talk about yesterday's flight to space. An astonishing, as I said, it was a triumph of hairdressing and makeup out of gravity. What else did we achieve yesterday?
Yes, that was amazing footage, wasn't it? I saw it live, and quite a glamorous look to space travel. Yeah, so obviously it's good, and it's good for gender parity that we see. This taking place, obviously. But when it comes to space travel, I mean, this is really for the absolute elite of elite. And it's at that point now where the actual pricing of those tickets is not being disclosed. So we don't actually know how much Katy Perry paid for her ticket. It's a combination of personal or of your social capital, really. But looking around on the market, such as other ventures like the Virgin Galactic one, you can be you have to be prepared to part with in the region of a few $100,000 for your ticket. A lot of that is speculation, like I said, because it's obviously not published. But really, what price can you put on it? If you can do it, fly, go.
Thank you, Sally. You're listening to Monocle Radio.
There's a craft to every question, which is why at UBS, we query every aspect of the market, working with specialized experts and award-winning research teams, covering over 3,500 stocks in 50 countries, all delivered in a comprehensive library, answering what you want with what you need. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Join Monocle every weekday and let the briefing guide and inspire you through uncertain times, always keeping you ahead of the curve.
It's devolving to a point where we're at odds with each other instead of letting our political leaders do the dirty work, so to speak.
Heavyweight coverage, no white noise, and always delivered with a smile.
The grey areas lead to a lot of sort of awkward conversations, and there's nothing the English dislike more than awkward conversations.
Keep your appointment with the briefing every weekday at 1300 CET, noon in London, here on Monocle Radio.
The Victoria and Albert Museum here in London has opened its doors to what's been called a once-in-a-lifetime exhibition devoted to Cartier. It features more than 350 pieces from the luxury French jewellers. And she's seen it. She's here. Brenda Toohey, Monocle's luxury markets editor. Good morning, Brenda.
Hi, good morning.
What did it feel like when you walked in?
It felt like you were in the most stunning jewelry box ever. I mean, architects Frida Escobida, the Mexican architect, and British architect Asaf Khan have really produced the most wonderful backdrop for all of these Cartier jewels to really shine. I mean, you're confronted by this incredible tiara. As soon as you walk in, it could take the sight out of your eyes. I mean, thousands and thousands of diamonds Consuelo Vanderbilt, a.k.a. the Duchess of Marlborough, gave Cartier to create this phenomenal tiara for her. So that's exhibit number one.
And then it just gets better and better and better.
Better and better.
And you have, this is an amazing exhibition insofar as the people who have been donating or lending their pieces is an absolute top level.
Top notch. I mean, the king has lent this tiny little chinchilla made of chalcedony and sapphires, amongst many other things. We have the famous Williamson brooch, which the queen loved, sporting a 25-carat pink diamond surrounded by wonderful white diamonds and fashioned into a wonderful rose brooch, and she loved that and wore it all the time. I mean, that's spectacular. We have the Duchess of Windsor's iconic jewels, the pelican, the Cartier panther sitting on top of the huge spherical sapphire. I mean, just wondrous, beautiful things. And really one of the most exciting pieces there was created by Cartier for the Mexican artist Maria Felix, and it is a full-on, fully articulated diamond snake which she wore around her neck, and the underbelly of the snake is fashioned in the colors of the Mexican flag. I mean, it's really stupendous. Every piece is knockout. Every piece.
It does sound like this is something that we should have had before, shouldn't we? That we've seen so many amazing exhibitions at the Victoria and Albert Museum that it was just waiting for Cartier to come.
You know, we've had Alexander McQueen. I mean, that was fantastic. We had Dior. That was wonderful. We've had Chanel. That was incredible. But now, wow. This is the creme de la creme. I mean, if you like beads, Barbara Hutton's jade, perfectly spherical jade, chunky necklaces there, terminating in a ruby and diamond clasp. I mean, there's something for everyone.
What does it mean for Cartier?
What does it mean? I mean, it's a wonderful platform for them to show all of their incredible archives, which I suppose they've been buying back and storing for years. They've reached out to private clients who have been very kind to lend the stuff to the wonderful stuff to the V&A Museum. I mean, it really puts them, as masters of what they do at the top of the top.
Highlights. What slipped into Brenda's pocket on the way out?
I mean, I am a sucker for a panther. There's a double-headed panther bangle, yellow gold, onyx and diamonds. That's pretty spectacular. And I wouldn't say no to a tiara. I'm not quite sure. Oh, there was an emerald necklace, 145 carats. I mean, that was unbelievable. So incredible. It was the Countess of Granard who had commissioned that special commission from Cartier in the 1930s. Yes, 143 carats. Big emerald surrounded by chunky monkey diamonds.
You don't need a tiara, you're regal enough. Brenda Toohey, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers too, Laura Kramer and Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Francesca Jilks. Our studio manager was Lily Austin, with editing assistance from Steph Chungu. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.